Welcome to WordPress Accessibility Day. My name is Jay McKay, and I'm the Director of Community Programs at Knowbility. Thank you for joining us for our next session, Think Smart and Adapt, meeting WCAG2 without rebuilding from scratch with Mike Zemak from Cut to Code. Mike has been on quite a journey. He's fond of new technologies, computer games, and good music. After graduating from conservatory, he was working as a singer and a music teacher, and then spent a year working as a creative director for a boutique e-commerce photo studio before falling in love with WordPress. So I'm really excited for today's session. Please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab in Slido, and we will answer them at the end of the session, and then use the ideas section to chat with other attendees.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to have you. My name is Mike, and I'm a project manager at Cut to Code. Just let me quickly introduce our company. We are a web development agency, and we create WordPress sites and Shopify stores. We work with a broad range of clients, starting from universities and research companies from the US, chemistry Nobel Prize laureates, local communities, upcycling brands, and NGOs fighting AIDS and the world hunger. The main aim of this presentation is to address some of the common web accessibility issues and to demonstrate the most time and cost-efficient methods of resolving them. So at some point of this presentation, I would also like to show you the difference between the approach we had even 2 years ago and our current website accessibility practices. I'll also demonstrate some solutions that have been a point of reference and a source of inspiration for our work. We'll also go through a couple of the most popular WordPress sites to pinpoint good and bad practices. It is understandable that people may not want to go through various documentations which, though they provide an invaluable source of knowledge, might seem daunting for an average website owner. So this is why, rather than focusing on theory, my goal was to present the content in a practical way, focusing on real-life examples and explaining the reasons behind using certain solutions. So in the course of this presentation, I will be emphasizing the fact that web accessibility is not a one-time action or something that you can simply check or tick with a particular solution like a plugin, but rather a mindset, a one that needs to be adopted and constantly taken into consideration. It's kind of an investment, though not necessarily a financial one, that pays its dividends in equal opportunities for a larger group of people. As a result, this will translate into increased traffic, and these people may potentially have a chance to become your clients or customers. Not to mention the fact that we can avoid lawsuits, which used to be individual cases in the past, but are now becoming more and more popular, especially in the US. Another benefit of adopting accessibility standards on your website is that it simplifies the user experience and makes it easier and more pleasant to navigate the site. As an old school keyboard person myself, I'm particularly inclined to websites and web apps that allow me to navigate entirely using the keyboard. There are other benefits of following accessibility standards, such as higher ranking in search engines, but I will not be covering this in this presentation. Okay, so let me go to the takeaways. What to know before choosing an accessibility plugin. So plugins, since most features a WordPress site can offer are usually achieved by the use of certain commercial or non-commercial plugins, it's the very first thing that comes into mind of a site owner when thinking about implementing accessibility solutions. We will feature some of the most popular accessibility plugins and discuss the core acceptance criteria that they should meet. You will learn what to pay attention to in your choice of plugins and how to differentiate between good and bad ones. So what are differences between bad practices and accessibility-oriented solutions? Well, to give you a hands-on experience, we'll go through an example of a badly optimized page and see what we can do to fix the accessibility issues there. This is also the section where I'm going to show you a couple of good examples on some of the most popular WordPress sites. For legal reasons, for obvious reasons, I won't be showing you the bad examples on live sites, but unfortunately, it doesn't really take much to find them on the internet. Now, as to the tips and tricks on how to check your current website compliance with WCAG2. a thing on general accessibility checkers. So there are various tools, both commercial and non-commercial ones, that allow us to check our score and assess the scale of accessibility issues, and thus can help us plan and prioritize specific actions. Virtually all of these checkers will indicate which issues should be prioritized, as not all of the issues are of equal severity. I'm sure that you're familiar with the 3 compliance levels. We distinguish 3 compliance levels within the WCAG2. So this is the A, AA, and AAA, and they are minimal, acceptable, and optimal accessibility thresholds, respectively. So unsurprisingly, you should act on the most critical level A issues before addressing AA or AAA. There's a caveat, though. One needs to acknowledge that depending on the website content or the layout or the design, it may not always be possible to achieve 90% and above score in the highest AAA level. Ways to improve accessibility on the website or by yourself. So when adopting accessibility best practices, one needs to remember that installing a plugin or hiring an agency to code some functionalities is not the ultimate solution. While there are some issues that obviously cannot be resolved without web development expertise, and it could even potentially be dangerous if amended by the site owners themselves, there are certain steps that you can and should take by yourself to increase the accessibility for all users. So while you may not be able to globally change font sizes from pixels to rem values, or to properly structure the HTML scaffolding, you probably know the content and the context of your website more than any developer. So your contribution should not be underestimated. At a later stage of this presentation, you will see that Web Agency can actually give you accessibility optimized website foundations, but the rest is in your hands. So that's why it's so crucial to remain ever informed about the best practices and understand what this accessibility is all about. Now, accessibility in real life. We'll go through a case study. So in this part of the presentation, we're going to showcase a real-life example of a website which has been transformed with accessibility in mind. Another digital agency, our business partner, reached out to us as they needed to improve the accessibility score measured by Siteimprove on the client's website. The acceptable threshold was 85, as that is the industry standard for education. And at the time, the score was around 60. So, well, we rolled up our sleeves, did some research, and helped them with achieving a more than satisfactory score. Actually, the screenshots I will be sharing are showing a slightly lower score than the current one, as I was preparing the presentation before. So I will run a check on this site in real time to show you how much it has improved just within a couple of days. You'll see that it's possible to significantly improve accessibility score and avoid lawsuits without resorting to rebuilding the website entirely. So the pros and cons of accessibility plugins, what to check before choosing one. As to the pros and cons of plugins in general, these are usually the same regardless of the plugin's purpose. So the good thing about them is that they provide a quick and easy solution to one's problems, but unfortunately they also come with the downsides like the reduced site performance and lack of flexibility. So this is the list of plugins, a couple of plugins that you can see in the WordPress repository. The first thought that arises when we want to improve accessibility without a lot of expense are plugins, and there are quite a few of them. So first of all, these are the questions that we need to ask before we want to utilize a plugin to implement some accessibility features. So the toolbar, how does it look? And is it keyboard navigable? Let me draw your attention to the toolbar, as most of the plugins come with one. So how does it look, and is it actually accessible? One needs to test this aspect of a plugin. We need to make sure that the plugin toolbars are properly visible, they have correct color contrast, and that they can be easily navigable using the keyboard. So if your plugin doesn't meet all of these requirements, it's better to find another one. And there's just plenty of them. So another thing, what are its functions? When we're testing a plugin, another question is, what are the toolbar's functions? And are these features working correctly? Believe me or not, I've tested various plugins prior to this conference, to this presentation. And I must say that using some of them was a complete nightmare. So now the thing about customization. is it possible to customize the plugin features? And can I extend its functionality? So regarding the customization, some of the plugins come with extra options that you can enable from the admin panel level. The plugin settings might give you an ability to increase the font size globally or change the styling of the toolbar itself, which is particularly useful if, let's say, the plugin toolbar is dark and your website theme is using dark colors as well, or vice versa. So another thing that you can do with customizable plugins is, for instance, you can adjust the skip to content button. Sometimes we have a situation where the ID of the main section on a page might be slightly different than usual. So it's nice to have an option to insert custom IDs so that the button, that the skip to content button can link to it correctly. Okay, now we're going to change the the screen. Thank you. So I'm using the Sandbox environment here. Let's go to the admin panel and plugins. I'm going to show you just two of these plugins. Accessible WP, Accessibility Toolbar. This one is kind of, it's quite common, it's quite popular. Let's activate this plugin. And as you can see, there is this guy, Accessible WP, just appeared here. Let's go back to the home page. And we can notice that there is there's a toolbar here in the upper left corner. So I'm only using the keyboard to navigate the site. Let me refresh. And I'm only using the keyboard, and actually I'm clicking through the entire admin bar. So I can log out, I can skip to content. This skip to content button is actually a native functionality of this environment. So it's not part of the plugin. And logo, homepage, bad example, empty items. I'm scrolling through the menu. I'm scrolling through the links, some of the items. Basically, I have to scroll through the entire site. I have to click through the entire site to get to this plugin navigation. So, well, that's a rather huge disadvantage of this plugin. But it has some nice features like keyboard navigation. I'm not entirely sure how effective it is, and I'm not really confident that it's very useful, as sometimes implementing keyboard navigation is not that straightforward. You can also disable animations. You can increase contrast, but actually, as you can see, the navigation here is kind of confusing, because this should be on and actually it's off. So the visual indicator shows that we are using a function and actually we are not using it. So this is kind of confusing. Decrease text, readable font, doesn't have any effect on the site. Mark titles, highlight links and buttons. This is cool. Okay. So, but in general, I would say that it's not the best plugin that I've ever had, and it's definitely not something that I would recommend because of the fact that it's not easily accessible. Okay, let's deactivate the plugin. Submit pages, plugins. Deactivate, and let's try another one. Another plugin is One-Click Accessibility. Let's go to the home page. There's a very subtle rectangle here in the upper left corner. So let me just refresh the site. I press Tab once, and I have the Skip to Content button, which is an actual functionality of this plugin. It's not the original Skip to Content button. And the other tab, so one more tab further, I'm in Accessibility Tools, so I can reach the toolbar quite easily. It's very useful. So I can click through or scroll through, click through these functionalities, increase text. I can do it repeatedly. I can decrease text, get back to the original one. Grayscale, high contrast comes in handy. Negative contrast comes in handy. Light background, links underline. It's very important. As you can see, it makes a huge difference. This is a very important aspect of implementing accessibility on your website. Links, you should never rely on the color differences between plain text and the links. So they should always have some additional indication that they are actually links and not just text. Readable font, okay, that's cool. And reset to reset all the features. So I would say that it's a really good plugin. It's a really nice solution. It's quite lightweight, very lean. Maybe if I were really I don't know, exigent, I would say that the button here, that the toolbar icon is too subtle for my taste, but still within a reach of 2 clicks, you can get into the accessibility tools. That's really cool. That's a very useful plugin. And if you're looking for an easy way, a quick and free way to improve your website accessibility, you should definitely go for this one. Okay, let me deactivate the plugin. Okay, deactivate. All right, and let's get back to the slideshow. Thank you. So a thing about good and bad practices, do's and don'ts of accessibility development. So in this section, I'm going to show you a couple of truly evident accessibility errors. I've created a sandbox site where I will demonstrate bad practices and share some tips and tricks on how to fix them efficiently using just the Gutenberg editor. But I can't say that I've had a vast experience with heavyweight builders like Elementor and the like, but I'm pretty sure that they should provide similar options. So I'm quite confident that you will have basic functions like alternative text for images and so on. Okay. All right. So we need to go to. We need to go back to the site. Thank you. So let me open the bad example here. Well, let's take a look at the hero image on this page. The text reads, "Have yourself a little coffee, you deserve it." But beside the fact that it's kind of cheesy and that the color contrast is here is simply outrageous, you may notice that nothing happens when I'm trying to grab this text. So I'm trying to select the text with the mouse cursor, but nothing happens. This is because it's the dreaded image of text, and it's a huge no-no for any respectable content editor. So it's definitely something that we should avoid. If we scroll down further a bit to the text section, you'll notice that there are no margins. So the letters adhere directly to the viewport, and it's just a torture to read. It's important to add some margins, and in WordPress, especially in Gutenberg editor, you can do so by inserting the text into a container. Sometimes it's not easily noticeable, but I think in this case, it's rather evident that the headings don't have a correct hierarchy. So as you can see, the first one here is a bit smaller. Sample heading. This sample heading is a bit larger. So the correct hierarchy is H1 to H6 without skipping any heading levels in between. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use all of the heading levels on all of the pages that you have, but if we are using, let's say, H2 and H4, let's make sure that there is an H3 in between. Another good practice for the headings is that there should be only one H1 level heading for the page. So it's also important from the reader's mode standpoint, and it helps the screen readers to render the sites properly. Okay, let's scroll to this one. Well, another thing that should be amended here is the color contrast. So while these examples are flagrantly illegible, even for people with perfect vision, even if you're a marksman, there are some color issues here. So there are some color combinations which might look okay at a first glance, but will be unreadable by people with various types of color blindness. So this is why a color contrast checker is an absolute must before we add any content to our website. Now for the uppercase text, well, not only that it's particularly annoying, in my opinion at least, but it's also difficult to read. So I think we should definitely reduce it to an absolute bare minimum. So if we really have to use the uppercase text, let's make sure that we use it for emphasizing certain words, not for emphasizing an entire paragraph, just like we have it here. Another thing, if your copy contains URLs, like we have here, https ://google.com, well, I can't really do anything with this URL as it's not a correct link. So make sure, if your copy contains URLs, you need to make sure that they're not plain text. They need to be actual links so that they can be easily accessed. And the same thing goes for email addresses and the telephone numbers. So the email addresses, we need to make sure that they are using the mail to : prefix in the href value. And for the phone numbers, these should be using a tel : prefix in the href value as well. So usually the Gutenberg editor can help us with this, as it should turn URLs and email addresses into actual links without any prompt. It just does it automatically. But the phone numbers, though, they're not rendered by default as links, because also they have slightly different formatting because of the country codes and so on and so on. So they are usually not rendered as links, and they might need more, let's say, manual input from the editors. So even if we amend the link here, okay, let's get busy. Let's try to fix this page. So I'm going to edit page and change some of these things. And so first of all, I would get rid of this image and replace it with an actual image without any text. All right. So we have alternative text. We can insert some old text here, like a coffee maker and a cup of coffee. What else? We can add text over the image. So this is what Gutenberg editor allows us to do. Add text over the image. Okay. Let's say I want to make it a heading. Let's make it a heading 1. And have yourself a little coffee. Okay. So I think we could get rid of the overlay. We don't need it. Sometimes it's useful, especially if we have tons of various colors in the image itself, and we want to make sure that the font, that the text is readable. Then we can apply some opacity filter on that. But in this case, I don't think I'm going to use it that much. Okay. I'll just make sure that dimensions are all right. Okay, the dimensions are all right. And it looks kind of good. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's definitely readable, and it's actual text, so that's cool. Yeah, align text left. Why not? Okay. So another thing that I would like to amend here would be the containers, or rather the lack of containers. It's easy to do it. I always use this list view, so it helps me with determining which parent and child element I'm using. Okay, let's add a container here. Insert before container. And we can just control command, if you're using Mac, command shift the entire text. So all of these blocks, they are selected, and we can just do command X to cut them. And now we can insert them into the container. So as you can see, we have the container here, and inside this container we have the heading, paragraph, and so on. So everything that we need. Okay, this should be helpful. Just let me check if we have. Let's see if we have the margins now. So it's good to check what it looks like on the front end. Yep, so we have, we're missing the heading here. That doesn't, it's not relevant at the moment, but we are definitely, we've made some improvement, as we can see that we have the margins now. So it's easy to read, but of course, what is not easy to read here is the color contrast. So let's make sure that we are using the right color contrast. Let's make it black. Let's make this H2. And let's make it black as well. So what is it? It's an H2 as well. Okay, let's make it H3. No, it's not black. Okay, let's get back here and make sure that it's black. Okay, it should be black now. All right. So H6, H3 here, H6 here. Well, that's a huge leap. So let's make it an H4. Let's change the text color here. And let's make sure it's not uppercase. Let's switch the default. And so now it's a regular text, normal text. And let's make sure that this https google.com is an actual link. I'm just going to click link, and automatically it becomes a link without manually inserting the URL. It's quite intelligent. Okay, let's do the same for the email address. And as you can see, Gutenberg Editor automatically added mail to support@mailbox.com. I don't think it's going to be that easy with the phone number, but let's give it a try. So yeah, that's what I thought. It's not that easy. So let me just copy it with Command C and link. We might tell. This is going to be an actual telephone link. Okay, sample heading, well, H3, we don't want an H3 here. Let's make it an H4, for instance. Heading H6. I think we're lacking H5, so let's make it H5. And same thing about the email here. All right, now it looks much better. Well, we still have this guy here. Let's just make sure that we're using an actual image and text instead of an image of text. So I'm going to change this image. Okay. If we really didn't need it, we don't have to put the text on the image. So, okay, this should look much better now. Here. So this was how we were able to. Okay, sorry, the sample heading, it got out of the container. Let me quickly fix it. Let's put it into the container. Okay, very good. Here, and let's make it H2. Okay, cool. All right. So, in just a couple of steps, we were able to improve the accessibility of the site. So this is what it looks like now. Okay. Let me get back to the slideshow. Let's discuss a couple of action items. So what can I do to fix it? What can I do to fix the accessibility issues? First of all, you can add alternative text to images. This is really important. When we're adding alternative text, it's important not to duplicate the actual text, the actual copy, right? So let's say that we have, I don't know, John Doe, and we have a picture of John Doe. Let's make sure not to use John Doe as the alt text, because the actual text will also say John Doe. So we have John Doe, read by the screen readers, and that's kind of confusing. Okay, we should make sure that we add descriptions and subtitles to each video, and actually you can do so with help of most of the video tools like YouTube, Vimeo, and so on. So they all offer, all these services offer this functionality. Make sure that the audio files are subtitles. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much the same as with the videos. And check the structure of the heading. So this is what we've just done. We've made sure that we have H1 coming from H1 to H6 or to H4, but we're not skipping any of the heading levels. All right. What else can you do by yourself? Choose a font size that is easy to read, right? So we want to make sure that the font size that we have is easy to read. Refrain from inserting images as links. It can also be confusing for people who are using screen readers, and make sure you're not using an illegible font family. That's a rather important one. So if you go to any of the site checkers like Siteimprove, you can actually you can check what font families are recommended and what font families are not recommended, and take care of the color contrast. So as I said previously, the color contrast checkers are an absolute must whenever we add new content to our website. All right. Okay. So a thing on the accessibility checkers. Before we jump into this subject, just a short caveat. From my experience, if your goal is to make sure that your website is only compliant with the standards to avoid lawsuits, you'll probably be fine with using just one of them. Having said that, if you really want to improve the website accessibility, it makes more sense to compare the results of at least two of these tools, as they will be slightly different. So one tool might pinpoint a specific error, and another one might just completely ignore it. So the first one that comes into mind, okay, we have the list here. Okay, so we have a list of a couple of accessibility checkers. We have Siteimprove, IBM Equal Access Toolkit, Wave, and Quality Logic. So Siteimprove, it's an excellent tool which provides very detailed insights. I've used it on a couple of occasions, and I can't recommend it highly enough. But one needs to keep in mind that it's a commercial service. So if you'd rather have your website checked for free, there are some alternatives to that. Lighthouse Accessibility Checker comes in a bundle with Google PageSpeed Insights. So it will show you the most critical errors, but it's overall quite lenient compared to other accessibility checkers. So I personally never use it as a point of reference for improving website accessibility. But it's nice to know that you can also use it. Another thing, another one on the list is coming from webaccessibility.com, and its main functionality is just a basic score check. But it also has, they provide some commercial browser extensions, and interestingly, they have tools that can help you with software development lifecycle. So you can integrate them into your workflow if you're using tools for testing automation like Selenium or Cypress. This is something definitely worth developers' attention. Another thing that comes into mind in regard to the free alternatives is the accessibilitychecker.org, which provides a rather detailed report on the exact elements. And the cool thing is that you can actually choose which standards you like to follow, depending on your location. So this is particularly useful if your goal is to make sure that your website is observing legal regulations in a specific country. My personal favorite is Wave by WebAIM. I'm not even sure if there's a commercial option of this tool, because the free version provides so much insight that I've never really given it a thought. You can generate a detailed live report, which allows you to interact with it in real time. You can switch to other pages. It pinpoints all errors, warnings, ARIA attributes, and so on and so on. So I'm just being conscious of time. We are running out of time a bit. So I'm not going to go through all of these accessibility checkers. But let's just quickly discuss the benefits of these. So they clearly show you what needs to be fixed. At least some, if not most of them, they show you what needs to be fixed. They usually show you the priority. Sorry, my Siri is on. Okay. All right. They also provide suggestions on how to fix it. So, well, whenever you have an issue, you can expand the issue. They have some drop downs. And they can point you directly to the W3 reference, where you can see the documentation, and you can just check what exactly needs to be fixed. And they also help you with understanding why certain things are considered as errors. So it's also nice to have in terms of educating yourself and staying ever informed. And, well, that goes without saying, they're compatible with the latest WCAG requirements. Okay, and sometimes using accessibility checkers, like running a full website check would be an overkill. If we want to check a certain color combination, we can just opt for a contrast checker like the WebAIM contrast checker or Siteimprove contrast checker. I think we have the Siteimprove one here. So as you can see, if the ratio is below 3 to 1, all of the tests will be failed. So we have the ratio here 2.13 to 1, and we are just failing all of the standards, right? We are not meeting any of the standards. In this case, the ratio is 5.63 to 1. And actually, as you can see, we're meeting almost all of the standards. So we have AA for normal text. We're not meeting the AAA for normal text. We're meeting AA for large text, AAA for large text, and AA for graphics. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm just being conscious of time, so let me proceed to the case study. So, one of the universities in the US reached out to our clients, our agency clients, as they needed help with making their website compliant with WCAG2. They emphasized that the score needed to be 85 points or above to make sure that the website was fully accessible and to avoid legal actions be taken against them. So this is a chart. Let me show you the chart. Okay, this is a chart of the score history, the score and the issue history. So when we started our work, the overall score was 66. And there were several critical A-level issues on the site, which, as you can imagine, made it virtually impossible to be read with assistive technologies. So I'm just going to quickly list some of the issues that we had. So some of the pages didn't have any titles, or they were extremely long. And actually, the page titles are quite easily resolved with WordPress. Basically, to set the main website title, you just go to the general settings and you have the respective field for that. And the same thing with individual pages. The very first heading of a page, at least in Gutenberg editor, so the very first heading of a page is an actual HTML title. Also, there are no ARIA labels used, and well, that makes it very difficult, if not impossible at all, to navigate the website using assistive technologies. And many images were lacking alt text, so that's also a big no-no. And the color contrast needed to be improved. So there were some places where we had very low contrast, and it was just difficult. It was barely readable. Okay, when we finished working on the site, the score was 87, and then came the new content, which introduced some minor issues and reduced the score to 84. And this was a very valuable lesson for us, as it proved it's crucial to stay ever informed about best practices. So our reaction was, first of all, to make some revisions and to fix the issues, and then to educate the client on how to keep the score high. So at the moment, the site improved score is slightly above 90, and the A and AA level issues have been reduced to the bare minimum. Because of the design layout and also some complex features, it wasn't possible to, to squeeze the maximum of it and to entirely get rid of AAA level issues. But this story clearly shows that with the right tools and attitude, you can transform an average site into a perfectly accessible and optimized website. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mike. This has been great. We have a couple of questions. This one came in twice. Does the grouping in containers have an effect on an accessibility or the behavior of screen readers?
Well, I think it's important to keep the right structure. So if, let's say, sorry, how do you mean grouping?
I think when you were looking at the, let me see if there was any additional information. Oh, that's all I have, just repeated twice.
Okay, all right. So yeah, if the person asking the question could elaborate on this, I'll be more than happy to answer to this question. But generally saying, well, the more complex it is, so the more complex the container structure is, the more difficult it is for the editors to keep it accessible, right? So we should definitely, I think the simplicity is the key here. So if we can do something in an easy way, in a simple, straightforward way, let's just opt for it.
Okay. And then another question about plugins. Are some plugins better for scale? So do some work better for smaller sites and 1 or 2 operators, or maybe some work better for large sites with multiple operators?
Sorry, how do you mean operators?
Again, I'm just reading as it's
okay. I
provided.
understand. Yes, I think, well, with the plugins, I think if they are simple and they are accessible, then there is really no say no reason to. Okay.
Oh, okay. So just
Okay.
some
Okay.
clarification.
Operators
Yeah.
as users. Okay.
There we go.
Operators as users. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Yeah. So I think, from the site performance perspective, it's better to keep the plugins as simple as possible, right? So if you're using, let's say, a heavyweight plugin, which might be useful for implementing some of the features on your website, if it's a complex one, you need to take into account the fact that it's going to affect the site performance. So, so it's also something that we need to keep in mind, right?
Right, and then we have a couple questions about the accessibility checkers. The first one is just, are there some checkers that are better for bigger websites versus smaller?
Well, I would say that there are, yes, that's a good question. I would say that there are, basically, if you are using the free checkers, you are just running a check against a single URL, usually, right? So, so it just takes more, let's say, manual input to enter all the URLs and make sure that all the pages that you're interested in, that all the pages are accessible, right? Whereas if you use commercial services, which most of these plugins really offer, if you use commercial services, well, you basically have better support. You have a full site audit, so you actually have people who are running the check for you. So it's a matter of compromise between doing a lot of manual work versus paying some money for the check, right?
And then there was a comment referring to the accessibility checkers that you mentioned, and they're saying, given that only about 30% of accessibility issues are testable by automation, how do you claim that a test with the checker can allow you to reach that WCAG compliance?
I totally agree with that. That's absolutely true. Well, we need to realize that there are certain limitations to these checkers, right? They are not, as much as the developers of these checkers may try, they're not intelligent at all. So we should always rely on someone who has more, someone who has expertise. We should refer to the documentation. There are tons of educational materials that you can read on the internet, and I think that they provide much more insight than just running a check on the website and then you think that you're done. That's completely not true. So I think that that's the most important factor here. The human contribution, right? It's absolutely essential. So I personally know a lot of sites. I've been doing a lot of research on some of the most popular sites, and I know a lot of sites which have tremendous scores, which have really great scores, like above 90 on most of the accessibility checkers, but they have basic, really basic issues with keyboard navigation. So we shouldn't only rely on the checkers themselves, and we shouldn't treat them as an absolute source of truth and a point of reference. So it's a nice addition, and it's useful. I would say it's useful primarily if your goal is to avoid lawsuits, just to get a certificate to demonstrate that your website is compliant, right? But there is a huge difference between compliance and accessibility itself. So I also know sites which are super accessible, which have tons of functionalities, all the ARIA labels, descriptions, keyboard navigation, and so on and so on. And at the same time, they have score like 70, which is kind of okay, but nothing spectacular, right? So yes, I think it's super important.
All right, well, we are out of time, but if you have an answer to this question in 20 seconds, do you recommend a particular plugin for e-commerce sites?
It would depend. If you mean WooCommerce, then I would say that the plugin that I was showcasing would be okay, right? But Shopify, there are tons of different platforms of e-commerce platforms. So there is no one straight answer to that. Sorry.
Not a problem. All right, well, thank you for the session, and
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending the session with Mike Zemek. You can continue this conversation in the chat or on social media using the hashtag WPA11Y Day and hashtag WP2022. We appreciate it if you do go to wpaccessibility.day/feedback to provide anonymous feedback for our speakers on their presentation. I believe there's also a way for you to enter in for a free t-shirt. Please stay tuned for our Lightning Talks Round 2 coming up next with Robert Jacoby, Nick Croft, and Katie Gleason. That will be at 5 p.m. And while you're waiting, please don't forget to visit our sponsors pages to grab some virtual swag and enter for a chance to win some great prizes. So thank you, and we'll see you right here after the break.